Well, good morning and thank you for joining us today. We're here and excited to share some details about our new Arts Prevail Fund at Rochester Area Community Foundation. So thank you again for making time for us. We're really excited about this program. But before we talk about the agenda, I just want to walk through some housekeeping to make sure that everybody knows how to work this GoToWebinar and to pose questions if you should have them. So if you haven't attended a webinar like this before, I wanted to point out that there's a control panel on the right of your screen. You can open or close that by clicking the orange arrow. If the audio was not automatically selected for you, you can select whether you're using audio from your computer or your phone in the audio pane. For the best experience, click on the View tab and select Full Screen. Your camera will be on and off. Your camera will be off and your mic as well during the duration of this seminar. But if you should have any questions, you can type them into the questions pane and hit enter or click send. And at the end of the program, we'll get to as many questions as we can during our time today. Today's presentation will be recorded. So if you'd like to watch it again, please look out for it on our website, or you'll see an email from us with those details. So I'm going to quickly review the program for today before I turn it over to my colleague, Annette Jimenez-Gleason, who is our program officer in Vitality here at Rochester Area Community Foundation. You're going to hear from Shawn Dunwoody, Creative Director of Dunwoody Visual Consulting, Arts and Community Activist, and also Rashaad Parker, Community Outreach Coordinator from Flower City Arts Center. Then at the end, we'll have a question and answer session with Simeon Bannister, our Vice President of Community Programs here at Rochester Area Community Foundation. So again, thank you for joining us. And now, Annette, take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning, everyone. And thank you to all of you who have taken time out of your day today to learn about our new Arts Fund and the important work it will support through the generosity of our donors. How many of us are aware that nonprofits employ more than 12 million people in the U.S. and that the majority of these nonprofits have less than 6 months of cash reserves, according to information from the Andrew Mellon Foundation? Now let us consider how precarious the situation is for our arts nonprofits. That was confirmed by the Community Foundation's own data analysis of COVID surveys from our nonprofits and the results from the COVID-19 Urgent Service Provider Support Tool that the Foundation is using to supplement our grant making. We found that 48 of the 114 arts organizations in our 8-county region had been operating with less than 3 months of reserves. 42% of nonprofits were experiencing financial strain, and the same strain was being felt by our individual artists. So in April, we partnered with Vote Art Collaborative for a 24-hour virtual fundraiser to support these individual artists, many of color, many of whom were facing homeless situations or were just plain not eating because their opportunities for gigs had run dry due to COVID. Thus, we saw the vulnerability of the gig economy of the arts. Also this spring, racial injustice brewed around us nationally with the killings of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd's murder, which brought the protests here to our backyard. In response, the Foundation made a conscious decision to develop a structure to establish a more solid base of support for our artists and arts organizations of color, which still remain a low number relative to the growing diversity of our region. So now is our turn to provide leadership. To that end, the Foundation introduces the Arts Prevail Fund that supports the 2 tenets of all our grant-making work: increasing the vibrancy of our region and providing equitable opportunities for our communities of color. As you'll see on screen, the new fund will support our arts nonprofits in 3 focus areas: documenting the Black Lives Matter movement, promoting racial equity in the arts, and providing adaptive equipment, including PPE, and the tech support that organizations will need to continue virtual programming. The Foundation sincerely appreciates your consideration in supporting these efforts. With that, I turn it over to two artists and collaborators who graciously welcome the opportunity to talk about their work related to Black Lives Matter and the role that art can play in telling and preserving the history that we are seeing unroll right before our very eyes. First, I think is someone most people in Rochester are familiar with. So I won't read his bio, but fun fact, Shawn Dunwoody is a lifelong Rochester resident and the son of record store owners. He's a street mural artist and activist, and he recently created Enough, a tribute to the fight for social justice and unity. With that, I turn it over to Shawn. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Annette. That's fantastic. Thank you so very much. And I want to say thank you to everyone joining us this morning. Hope you're having a great morning. What I want to talk about here is just the importance of connection of artists of color and what that means to the fabric of Rochester itself. Rochester's core has actually been that of a movement of people. We know from it, I try to base Rochester's movement upon our falls. The energy is always moving forward and always changing and always creating new life, which actually brought folks here, which also created so many social movements here in Rochester that affected the world. And I think we're at a point in time where we have that same sort of structure, that same flow and energy. So one of the things that I participated in, or actually one of the things I did, is you can see on this slide, is Enough. You know, we were all dealing with the COVID experience, isolation, separation, and confusion. And in the midst of that, I was asked by many media outlets, how do I feel about this situation, or what's going on? We had our racial unrest as well. We had our Black Lives Matter movement and many fires ablazing, literally, in this country. And when asked in a position as an artist of color leader, I was like, whoa, okay. What do you have to say? And I didn't want to say anything. It had to have proof in the pudding. And so I realized at one point in time, I had just about enough of everything. And so I took to the walls. As we know, the portraiture and art making on the walls goes back centuries as far as giving message and voice to the people. That is the basis of graffiti. And so I realized I need to take something to the walls. And so I went out and painted Enough on 68 Sile Street, using a multitude shades of brown representing those people of color, and leaving that space open for people to say what they had enough of. So it actually became a large chalkboard, and I left chalked out for people to do something. Later on that day, as you can see in the next little clip there, it was covered in what people felt enough. I wanted people to say, there's enough. I've had enough police brutality. I've had enough of racial injustice. I've had enough of sexism. Or they could say, there is enough money to actually help individuals in this world. There is enough food to feed a society. So there are pros and cons to what was enough, but it gave voice to the people. And from that movement, I was working with the city of Rochester to actually paint the Black Lives Matter on Court Street. But with that, there was another avenue I wanted to add to it. Besides just making that statement on the street, I felt we needed to be able to amplify the voices of the people who gather at Martin Luther King Park to actually express their voices of what they've had enough about, what they're expressing about Black Lives Matter. So with it being an amphitheater itself, I felt the best way to amplify the voices that are there, because people come and gather, they bring the protest signs. We have to realize that protests are really in origin and in heart an arts-based movement. You have protest signs. Everyone wants to see what's the best protest sign, what's the coolest quote, or what looks the best. There are chants, there are songs, there are marches. That's a dance. There are speeches. There's poetry. So protest in itself, in essence, is an arts movement. And when people gather and they have their protest signs, they've given their speeches, they've done their marches, and they disperse, that energy has been left. And so I felt a good way to actually learning from the Enough wall is actually to take MLK Park and paint it all completely black, so that that energy can be left for those who may not be able to attend some of the gatherings, or even for those who might even be afraid to attend some of those gatherings, so they can actually hear some voices of the people that they may not have ever had the opportunity to interact with. So the walls that you can see in this slide here were overrun by people who wanted to send a message about Black Lives Mattering, about trans lives mattering, about human beings' lives mattering. This central area became a connection point. There was one story of a gentleman who told me he was writing some information about Black Lives Matter, and he happened to come across a gentleman who was writing All Lives Matter. And in that amphitheater, the place where you want to amplify voices, they had the chance to have this connection, this opportunity, which might not have had happened in any other way. This is actually one of Rochester's largest art installations to date. And so this has actually become that amplified voice, this amplified piece. Next slide, please. Let's take a look at what these next slides are here. And as you can tell, people have actually been saying what they want, what they feel. So this has actually become a destination. So now, other than outside of its fountain running and people coming to the park, it's actually created a new form of placemaking. So I've been there during the day and at 2 o'clock in the morning, where people are still gathering and coming together in this arena, in this amphitheater, to listen and rather read the voices of others and actually to express their own. And the city's actually pitched in and made this a brighter and lighter space so people feel safe 24 hours a day to actually engage in those voices. And one of the great things about it, next slide, please, is that and this is actually a group of youth and community members. I actually had a day where I had community come out and help paint this amphitheater throughout the course of 2 days, the ceiling and the floor. And I have to give a shout out to all my sisters of color who actually helped make that first phase effective and happen. But it showed that community wanted to express themselves. They brought their kids, their grandchildren, and everyone participated in creating this amphitheater, this voice for everyone to amplify their voice. Next slide, please. As you can see, there are all quotes there. But great things actually came of this as well, where it became a communication wall, where teachers and librarians couldn't interact with many of their students or their participants. So one person actually put a suggested reading list for some of their students that they weren't able to reach via whatever social web or virtual learning. And they wrote this on the wall and put their names next to it. The next day, those kids actually saw what was written on the wall and checked off that they were going to read them. From that, the library saw the reading list. Monroe County Library Assistant, Patty, she saw the reading list and said, hey, these are books that maybe we should have supplied in the free library that I worked on with right above MLK Park. And they installed these books in the free library. So from someone working with their students, it actually brought that information, the arts, the literature, to a whole nother group of audiences that might not have ever had that opportunity to actually engage that way. Next slide, please. Once again, people are with their points about what shapes them, what makes them angry, and what shows that makes us together and how we can all rise. So there are some positive notes. There's some frustration that is given, and there are some highlights. Once again, educational points, and it's become once again a destination where people can experience the voices of Rochester at any given point in time, which is a powerful thing to happen. Next slide, please. And once again, it's saying, let's not forget these voices. Let's not forget these people. And one of the things that has happened is it's taken on its own life and it's become its own entity and place. And so my first initial drop of chalk has since been gone, of course. But now Rochesterians have brought ample supplies of chalk for people to continue this project. And one of the beautiful things about it is that as we know, voices and many things may not last forever. And so when it rains, all of what you see gets washed away. And amazingly, within a 24-hour period, it is all covered again to keep continuing those voices and keep continuing that spirit so that it remains alive. So we know that it doesn't die. It's just not a stagnant event or a stagnant place. This is always alive and evolve and moving. Next slide, please. And what has also happened from this, I'm sorry, and I'll pass it over to Rashaad. What has also happened is that folks have actually gotten together, and it's become a meeting place for sort of an old school hip hop that happens on Sunday afternoons. So now it's become another gathering place for people to express themselves through music. Hip hop being that if you look at its history, it was actually expressing to where it's actually speaking to the times of the people and what's happening in their heart and what was happening in the situations they were dealing with racial disparities, economic disparities, and actually telling that story. That's the root of what hip hop was about, and spreading that message to the community. So now this area has amplified and shows there's a power in voice in those artists and artisans and creators of culture. I will say creators of culture who are of color. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Rashaad. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Shawn, and thank you showing how this project is really making those connections between art, community, education. It's so valuable, and I love how you said that even when it rains and it's gone, people come back and keep taking part in getting their messages out there. Thank you. And remember to type in your questions in the question tool as we go along so that we can get to them in the Q&A portion. And next up, let's give a warm welcome to Rashaad Parker, who is also a Rochester native, community outreach coordinator at Flower City Arts Center. His artwork focuses on Afrofuturistic mixed media assemblages. He is finishing up a master's degree at Visual Studies Workshop. And he's also been part of the the Greater Rochester MLK Junior Commission. Thank you so much, Rashaad, for being here today. We're going to start with a video, and then Rashaad will talk about his project.
That we are addressing.
It's a lot of roller coaster emotions. I'm very angry.
Overwhelmed. It's been a long time coming, so I'm really overwhelmed with all what's going on.
I guess the most accessible words I think right now are anger, deep sadness, but ultimately hope.
I've been having a rough couple of weeks, but it always feels good to come out here and feel the energy of all these people here.
Today's been a good day. It's great to come out and support these community events that focus on Black lives, because they really do matter. I'm a mother of 2 boys and married to an African-American male.
How am I feeling? I'm feeling very disappointed in society, period.
A combination of elation that this is going on, and I've lived to see this. This is part of once in a 50-year cycle event, and fortunately, there's no fear at the moment like there was 2 weeks ago. Grateful that I can have these discussions.
We've seen tragedy, but it seems like things just don't want to change.
I'm feeling both disgusted at the system that has been in power for the history of this country, and also very excited to see so many people coming together and actually confronting it and trying to envision a better way to do things.
What are you doing to cope with the pandemic and your emotions surrounding racial injustice?
Prayer, because we're not gonna, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but he's given us a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. So as long as we stay prayed up, my thought is, whatever's gonna happen, you just stay prayed up and hope for the best.
For me, spending time outside has been personally really helpful. But action has been the biggest thing for me. Asking for the support and making sure that anyone around me has access to the support they need from me. Or
Well, I've been staying in the house a lot, trying to, go by the rules, with my mask and stuff.
I listen to a lot of music. Music is my life. Music is what saved my life a couple of years ago. Writing and listening to music has been how I've been coping with all of this going on. I think.
Hi. Hello, everybody. I can't see myself, but apparently you guys can see me. I'm Rashaad, and Rock City Speaks was a video that I felt was very important to produce, quite frankly, because I, as a Black man, knew that this movement needs to have documentation, and not just documentation from the media perspective and these sound bites that we see that don't necessarily tell our story. And so my goal was to tell our story and to also invite others to participate in the conversation, right? And so Rock City Speaks was really a quick um, um, basically, just on the cuff, boots on the ground. Let's go after it. Let's get, the voice of the people. And we did that, and we turned the project around in less than a month. And so it was great to see that momentum, that synergy of like-minded, creatives that, agreed that, we should do this and to make it happen. And so we were able to produce that video in connection with Rochester Contemporary Arts Center. Blue Seas approached me and asked me, what did I feel about, doing a project like this? I said, well, honestly, I'm kind of already doing that with an after-school program that I manage called Expanding the Field at Flower City Arts Center, where I had asked the students to produce their own 1-minute public service announcements that, address whatever issue they wanted to address, but definitely addressing the issue of racial inequity in Rochester, police brutality, and just overall sense of, anger and frustration, at the result of the killing of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and many, many others. And so it was very important to get, the young person's perspective and then the city of Rochester residents' perspective as well. I don't know if you guys, I know you guys can hear me, but I can't hear anybody responding back, but I'll just keep talking. Can I get the next slide, please? So we know about Rock City Speaks. We know that some of the players that, participated was Rajesh and Coco and Kylie and Juliana. And like I said, this was in collaboration with Rochester Contemporary Arts Center. And so we did it. We made it happen. And I'm very proud that, we were able to shoot this pilot, if you will. And the goal is to produce 8 more segments of the show where we will continue to document Black Lives Matter's rallies and protests, as well as, any other legislation that may be passed as a result of the protests and or, outcries from the city. And we know that, some of that is starting to happen, as a matter of fact. And so we want to, make sure that we have these instances documented. We want to make sure that we have the voice of the people also documented and reflected in our stories, in our narrative. And we want to make sure that this is a part of the history of Rochester in terms of an archive, in terms of a place that, we'll always be able to go back and revisit, this momentous time in history. And so Rock City Speaks will hopefully speak to that endeavor. And next slide, please. Oh, all right. Well, before we get to questions and answers, I just want to say that with the project that I worked on with Rock City Speaks, as well as the work that I'm doing at Flower City Arts Center, my goal is always to empower young people to share their voice, to use their art, to let their art speak about the social issues that they're facing today. And I can tell you that, just from my experience in working, closely with them, that they are very much in tune with what's happening. They're very much, affected by what's happening, and they do want to be able to have an outlet in which they can create work and share their voice. And so, as we assemble teams to go out and document the protests, I'm also working with my group, Expanding the Field, to do that as well as a group project. Where we will work with the city, with Flower City Arts Center and other community organizations to produce a video work that can also participate in the Rock City Speaks media forum, this outlet that we're trying to get off the ground and produce more shows and incorporate young people's voices as well as young people's talent when it comes down to the production of the video. This segment and the movement is very, very much important and needed. I wrote a poem called From Plea to Protest as I deal with my own feelings about, the senseless killings of Blacks in the city of Rochester and around the world, really, as well as police brutality, as well as racial, injustices and inequities, and just kind of working through those emotions and feelings, and really running the gamut of those emotions and feelings. And so the name of the poem is called From Plea to Protest. And I'm going to read that for you guys real quick. Pain, anger, frustration, and rage are the seeds that keep us locked in a cage. Only love sets us free, enables us to become the men we're destined to be. Now, I know it's easier said than done, but through faith, hope, and belief, we shall overcome. Brother, your life is a gift, and your poetry is the light. Don't give up the fight, young blood. Just hold on. I've been where you are, and you're not alone. Brother, your life is a gift, and your poetry is the light. It's true, Black folks have suffered a terrible plight. And there's a million other brothers just like you and me, crying out for a Black family, where daddies stick around to raise their child and mama's dreams of a better life don't vanish in the clouds. Brother, your life is a gift, and your poetry is the light. Get up, stand up for peace. Only love sets us free. Well, at least that's what I used to think, until I seen one too many brothers be killed on TV brutally by police. Until I seen Eric Garner and George Floyd cry out, I can't breathe. One from a chokehold and the other by a white cop's knee on his neck. My poem had to change from plea to protest. And so I protest every form of racist ideology. I protest the all too common cases of police brutality and every Black man, woman, and child being killed on the street. I protest inequity and inequality. I protest the inadequate education system and structural racism and poverty by design. I protest white supremacy under the guise to destroy Black lives. I protest the denial of my humanity and my Black identity. I protest injustice and institutionalized oppression, the racist judicial system, and every white judge and white police officer that's abusing their power within. I protest Agent Orange, number 45, otherwise known as anti-POTUS. In fact, I protest every organization that aligns itself with the status quo. You know who you are, the ones that feel the need to wear a robe everywhere you go. Yet I protest any stigma imposed upon any social group living their lives unapologetically with pride. And I also protest every negative stereotype, those media myths perpetuated to blot out Black lives. Why? Because I have a Black brother right now serving 25 years to life, and his life matters. My life matters. All Black lives matter. Black lives matter. So take your pick, my people, but most of all, pick your protest and protest. Thank you.
Rashaad, thank you so much for that artistic offering. We certainly appreciate not only your comments about the wonderful project that you've had underway, but again, for sharing this wonderful offering. We're going to invite Shawn back into the conversation as well. And Shawn, if you want to go on ahead and pop on your webcam. There you are. And we also want to invite all of you that are listening to continue to share your questions. That'll, of course, be the basis for the Q&A. I'll be keeping an eye on the question box as we pose some of your inquiries to these wonderful, wonderful guests that we have. And I'll start with a question. These are both friends that comes from another friend, Suzanne Mayer, who asks how these art forms can create something in the Interloop North project that can connect with racial reparation work. And Shawn, why don't you start?
All right, great question, Suzanne. All right, of course. Well, if we look at, it's an excellent question. As we look at, and I'm part of this committee as well, moving forward in this eventual fill of Interloop North, for those of you who don't know, it displaced many families of color when they built this interloop. And so in the movement to move forward, we're looking at sort of reparations or how do we look at racial equality building forward for these communities. And sometimes the best way to bridge the gap or to bring people together are through the arts. There's ways that are familiar to folks, whether it be through song and dance or whether it be through poetry, as Brother Rashaad just did, or whether it be through some sort of visual medium. I just recently did that as we talk about connecting neighbors to that eventual fill. We were working on Lewis Street Center, painting a mural with community residents, and they came out because they're like, hey, what are you doing? This is actually a way to educate folks on what eventually could happen, 200 feet from their home. And it was a way to gather information about how they feel about their neighborhood, as well as what they would like to see nearby in their community and how to strengthen those persons of color in that community. And it was based upon people seeing actual art being made in the community. It was inviting and connecting. So I think moving forward in the process of building a new Rochester, when you have 21 new acres of new land to be in place, I think creatives are key in engaging individuals and helping to shape that conversation that happens. I think that's a very valuable thing to have, is to have creatives at the table when we're starting to design and create our communities. And I'm gonna jump off subject, but talk about creative connection points and having the honor of being on the Rock the Riverway Advisory Committee. And at the 11th hour, speaking on the creative classes, advocating for a Rock City skate park, something that is self-programming and actually racially connecting, because those of fair skin or darker skin can skateboard and have these conversations. And now everyone's actually excited about it. So it's really thinking about, how do you think about arts in shaping Rochester and shaping the wider community as well? It's very valuable that you have those creatives, and particularly creatives of color, at the table to help equify or equalize what's actually happening and give those voices. Thank you. I hope I answered your question there, Suzanne Mayer.
Yeah, no, I think we answered it, and also helped us to understand why creatives are so important to creating a sense of place. Another question for Rashaad. One of the through lines that I heard through both of your presentations was this notion of the power of community voice. And just wondering if you could share why community voice is so important and so critical, and how arts informs it.
Community voice is key. I think that, you know, when we think about art, that creatives have the power of the imagination. And when we hear from the community, we're able to synergize that creative. We're able to, you know, bring people together in which to actually ultimately affect a common goal, to affect changes in our community. And, you know, it's just very, very, very important that the community is involved with any type of, you know, art space or art, you know, initiative, because, you know, people have, you know, creative imagination, and that has power. And we need to make sure that you know, they're a part of the conversation.
And Rashaad, kind of extending that question, one of the interesting notes of the project was that it was the anti-media project. And so can you talk a little bit about what the media is missing in its narrative that the project is attempting to capture?
Yeah. So, you know, when I watch the news, man, I see, you know, a lot of times the angle be slanted to affect one, you know, sense of mindset or the other. And a lot of times that mindset does not reflect the people that they're basically reporting on. In other words, it doesn't necessarily affect Black people and what they're trying to say and what they're being affected by. You know, a lot of times that's missing from the media perspective. And so, you know, I developed Rock City Speaks to provide a perspective that's directly related to the people and having their voice be heard in their own words.
Thanks so much. Can you talk a little bit about how you selected the respondents for the project, and how you identified those folks to speak?
Yeah, so what we did was we set up a TV studio, a street TV studio, if you will, across the street from MLK Park. And at that time, Five Star Bank had their windows all boarded up. And so we thought, you know, what a perfect background, right? To show that, you know, this is the state that the city is in right now. You know, businesses are boarding their windows up, you know, for fear of, you know, protests or violence or what have you. And of course, we feel that fear every day. When I leave outside of my apartment, that fear is ever present. Now, I'm not walking around scared, but I understand that the reality is that I may or may not make it back home in one piece. That is my reality as a Black man. And so we use that as a backdrop to tell the story. And we really just invited people randomly to come over and talk about, you know, how they were feeling, you know, in the midst of a, you know, global pandemic and a racial outcry for Black lives. And so those are the people that decided to come and share their voices.
Absolutely. Shawn, really interesting, this idea that each day contributions of the community of writing is just kind of washed away and continuously replenished over and over and over again with new thoughts. That said, there's an interesting tension in Rashaad's comments. He talked about the importance of archiving. And so if you can just talk a little bit about this idea of, on one hand, the need to archive and how art in many ways helps us to, you know, kind of capture the sentiment and mood of the moment for posterity, but at the same time, why it's important to constantly be renewed.
Yes, I will speak on the archive. It's very important. I myself do not have the actual time commitment to archive this, but there are a great number of photographers that have actually been documenting the words that have been written on these walls before they're washed away by the rain or written over. But there are people who believe so much and holding on to the message. I get out as much as I can to document this, but there are some great messages there that are about speaking against oppression, that are speaking about police brutality, that are speaking about Black Lives Matter. There are also amazing pieces of artwork that are being produced that speak to volumes to the times that are actually happening. And once again, as I mentioned earlier, there are people having cross conversations on a wall, which is amazing to document. So it's very important to understand the climate of how, because it actually speaks to the time of COVID as well, where we're separated, but we still need to find ways to be connected. And if it's in the medium of using a chalk wall and communicating with one another once a week, every other day, it's a great way to really speak to one another and to document what is happening. So folks have actually been doing that, and they actually send me a lot of photos. I get a lot every day of people who are just on their cell phones because the community themselves are engaged or appreciate that people are willing to vocalize their feelings of the time every day, every hour, which is almost like having a 24-hour newscast, but it's in the form of art, which is an amazing thing to see happen in the city of Rochester. So it's very important to be able to document these voices and these movements that are happening, these points of engagement that are happening that otherwise we may not see, as Rashaad mentioned on other people's media. This is in your hands. So now these voices are actually amplified from that wall to a device in their palm, their phone, to their outlet. So what happens is you have people who are sending the messages further than one voice could actually carry. So this is where documentation takes on a whole nother leg of doing that. It'd be great to have a formal documentation, but it's being documented by thousands of others as they venture and go into MLK Park and to the enough law. Oh, man.
Yeah, I think, no, thanks so much, Shawn. I'm always struck by whether it's the documentaries by Ken Burns, the Eyes on the Prize, those period documentaries that capture the moment. And so thank you for the work that you guys are doing. One of the things that we're hoping to do is to mobilize some of the resources to support that documentation, to support that archiving, so that we do have it for generations to come with the Arts Prevail Fund. Rashaad, can you talk a little bit more about how additional funding, how additional resources might amplify your project and the effect that it would have?
Absolutely. We need money to make this happen. We want to be able to, pay people for their talent and for their time. We want to be able to get a secure crew and staff of people that, are committed to making sure that we do these videos. And so that, will take money. It will take money for, the equipment that we may need, that we will need as well, transportation, and editing and producing the overall work. It's very, very important for this particular project to be funded and supported because we can't do it long term, without it. We were able to successfully shoot the pilot with the help of, the Contemporary Art Center there. But, going forward and to be able to produce that, as a series, if you will, and also with the possibility of it, kind of spinning off and creating like these documentaries, right, for people's story. If you notice, Pamela Owen, she talked about her 14-year-old nephew being killed on Park Avenue. That is, an additional story that I want to explore personally. And, I like to get, more of, time with her to, document that very important part of Rochester's history. And so we definitely need that help and support.
One question that comes in is about the importance of inclusion and equity in arts funding. And it certainly can't be lost on anybody that's watching right now that we are 3 African Americans on a foundation channel of all places talking about arts and opportunity. Can you guys talk about inclusion and equity and why it's important? And why don't I pitch to you first, Rashaad, and then Shawn give you a chance to talk on it as well.
Oh man, it's very important that we all have a seat at the table. It's very important that, voices are heard and represented and, valued and edified, honestly. And when it comes down to equity, we need, a stake in the game. We need to be able to produce more work, to have more of creative outlets, and to employ people and to bring people in that, have the skill set, have, the voice, that have the creative and can, make this thing work. Because we are standing right now in a time of history like unlike any other time before, I would say. And so the fact that I'm alive here at this time, it just means so much to me to be able to have, a seat at the table and be able to, work with like-minded individuals such as yourselves. Like I'm very, proud to be able to, work with Shawn and work with you, Simeon, for all of these years, because it's so, so very important that, we make our art, work, and that we let our art speak.
Shawn?
I'm going to say I agree. It's fantastic that you have to be able to support individuals so they can have a seat at the table, but you have to be able to support individuals so they can create their own table. I think that's important. We can't keep coming to the picnic asking for a dish if we can't bring our own potato salad. So there's got to be a point. There's got to be a point in time where you're looking at equity at this table, but you have to look at supporting equity at building this table so that all communities rise at the same time. So I think that's an important part of sitting at the table, is to be able to build another table that is driven and created by those persons of color. I think that's a valuable thing. If we look at many great movements, you're going to need that establishment to be able to move forward, to have each one teach one, as I like to look at it. We need to have that foundation established as well, so that we can have individuals speaking on their own behalf at their own centers, at their own table, as well as addition to supporting those voices at other tables. So I hope I'm making sense there.
No, it absolutely does. And I want to thank you both for having joined us today for this Q&A. Thank you for all of the questions that came in, and inviting Annette and Andrew to rejoin us. And we're so excited about what this fund can do to support artists like Rashaad and Shawn and so many others who are coming up the ranks. And so I'll pass it over to Andrew and Annette. I'm sorry, Shawn.
I just want to plug something as well as we talk about outreach and growth. I have been reached out to by many counties and other suburban areas about having the same initiative happen in their areas, which is valuable to understand. Meaning this sort of amplified voice in a black box sort of theater, and actually applying these messages because they want that in their community. Because not only should we have those voices of the city of Rochester, but let's find out what's happening in Hilton. Let's find out what's happening in Geneseo. Let's find out what's happening in Pittsburgh, and document those voices as well, whether they're positive or negative. But it's a great movement that I think a lot of people would like to see in their community. So I'm gonna hand it back over to you, Simeon. It's like I'm pointing at you. I feel like there you go.
Shawn, you make a great point. And listen, as you know, we cover all of the places that you just named, going down to Geneseo, going out to Wayne County, and down to Livingston, and over to Orleans and Genesee. And we do have an obligation to be thinking regionally about how we, as you said, how we amplify this message. I'll turn over to Andrew and Annette.
Yes, thank you, Rashaad and Shawn. And exactly what you're talking about is what we've been talking about with Rashaad and Shawn and others to make sure we are capturing all that's happening all throughout our region. And that's why this fund will be so important to that work, to support that work. So thank you both. Your presentations were great. Thank you for all who submitted questions and attended. We want to remind you that this recording will be available. And also please contact Andrew, Simeon, or I if you need any follow-up information. I also want to note that Rashaad's powerful poem, he has graciously offered, if anyone wants a copy of that, you can email me and I can get that to you. So thank you so much, Rashaad, for sharing those very powerful words. Please be sure to complete our post-webinar survey. Thank you again, and I'll turn over to Andrew.
Thank you. Thanks for the heads up. It's great that we're able to pull something together like this so quickly with the talented people like Rashaad and Shawn, and really the whole arts community. We are here at the Community Foundation to answer questions, and we want to try and raise money for this because it's an important cause, it's an important time, and we can all rally together to really uplift these voices and this movement. So the Philanthropic Engagement Team, we are here to help you donors and fund holders who would like to make a grant to this fund or to answer any other questions that you might have. So please reach out, and thank you for being here this morning and sharing some time. Simeon, do you want to give a preview of what's coming up next?
Yeah, so we're doing twinsies here. And in addition to this webinar next week, we'll also be sharing a fund that's oriented towards some of the practical work that we're doing to alleviate the challenges of racial inequity by launching a racial equity growth webinar. We're taking a positive perspective on how we can ameliorate some of the challenges that we know have beset this community and held back our promise that we can realize fully this community's promise through a racial equity growth fund that will contribute to so much of the great work that's happening around the community and work in tandem with the Arts Prevail Fund that we've launched here today. I think my last job is to thank everyone one more time and to express again our significant gratitude, Rashaad, Shawn, to our wonderful team, Andrew, Annette, Karen Schwartzman's working behind the scenes to keep slides moving and all that work, and of course to all of our guests here today. We're excited, and this is a new approach for us sharing these webinars and making sure that you are aware of what's going on in the community as you leverage not only the funds that you're contributing to the foundation to deploy, but also through your advised funds. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. We are grateful, and we look forward to seeing you next week.